Welcome! My name is MA and I hope you're well. Today, if you hear noise behind me, there's some rain and some noises that might make my dog act crazy, so warning. But thank you for being here. Today we are reading chapter 2 of Moby Porcelain, a memoir by Moby. And all the music you might hear in the background either has to do with the story or is music from Moby. Does that make sense? Was that an English sentence? Cool. Also, first time that I'm reading this and I am not alone. I have a true English person with me who is able to correct me when I say things that just don't make sense, and I realize later in editing. Right?
Right.
Also, suggested from last videos, I've put my microphone closer to my face. You can hear me better. These videos are just gonna get better, so let's get right into it. Last chapter, if you're new here, go and watch it, the last video. But if you just want a little recap, because it's been a little while, well, pretty much, Moby comes from a poor side of the neighborhood, and in 1989, he rented an abandoned factory. When I say rented, he would give $50 a month to a security guard, and he devoted his life to just making music, but he didn't have much money or material, and finally he has an opportunity to DJ in the basement of an up-and-coming New York bar. So that's where we're at. This chapter is chapter 2 in section 1, and it's called Vegan Cookies. Let's dive into it. Someone shot Jamie? I asked. I was standing in front of the abandoned factory in Strandford on a sunny Friday afternoon, talking to one of the other squatters. No, he got stabbed, the squatter Pedro told me. Someone heard screaming last night and then saw 3 guys running down the hall. They looked in Jamie's room. He was laying on the floor in a pool of his blood. Pedro was a photographer and a graffiti artist. His graffiti tags were all over the factory complex, in the elevators, on the dumpsters, on every inch of the loading dock. He always wore an old brown leather motorcycle jacket, and he'd been living in the factory for 10 years. You're kidding me, I said. I saw him yesterday. Look, his motorcycle's still there. Pedro eyed Jamie's Triumph, sitting down between 2 dumpsters. Do you think someone will take it? He asked. I'm surprised it's still there, I said. Am I stealing it if he's dead? There was a long pause as if we both stared at it. Finally, I said, I think it's kind of a gray area. One of the advantages living in the factory was that no one paid attention to what we, squatters, did. In addition to making electronic music and DJing, I was playing drums in a punk rock band called the Pork Guys and banging on metal cans in an industrial band called Shopwell. Well, we needed to rehearse. We took our equipment to some empty part of the factory and made as much noise as we wanted. Nobody complained. It was an abandoned factory in a crack neighborhood. As long as we weren't killing people, we were left alone. But last month, somebody had killed a homeless guy in the parking lot, and now Jamie had been stabbed to death. The other squatters and I weren't afraid that we'd be hurt. We were afraid that the police would figure out what was going on and we'd be evicted. People dying in the abandoned factory wasn't good for our anonymity. You know what the hell I'm trying to say. Anonymity. If you leave, where do you think you'll go? I asked Pablo. I don't know, he said. Maybe Brooklyn or the Lower East Side. I have some friends in a squat on Avenue C, but there are rats. Most squatters lived in abandoned apartment buildings, and because abandoned apartment buildings had previously been lived in by people, they were usually filled with rats and roaches. The beauty of living in an abandoned factory, apart from 1 million square feet unused industrial space, was that there were no rats or roaches. And you? Pablo asked. Where would you go? I can't move home, I said. So, I'd probably move to New York somehow. Can you afford it? Or would you squat? If I DJ more, I could probably pay $150 a month for rent. That's a lot, he said. I know, but I need to be in New York. Word. Okay, we'll see you later, Pedro said. Don't get stabbed. Poor Jamie, I said, giving his Triumph one last look, as if I could say goodbye to Jamie through his motorcycle. I had been in Greenwich at 4 p.m. for Bible study. And after that, I was going to the Episcopal church where I DJ'd on Saturday nights to hold a microphone for Chris while he shot his student film. I rode my mop. I could go to Greenwich in about 30 minutes. I put on my helmet and headed west. Past the pool hall, the storefront churches, and the drug dealers, I drove up to Route 1, passing the old Anthrax Club, where had been Circle Jerks and Agnostic Front, and countless other hardcore bands in the early 80s. I wasn't sure what we were talking about there. It was band names. Makes sense. Then I headed west, passing the Villa Bar, where I used to get drunk when I was 16. One time in high school, I'd blacked out in the toilet at the Villa. A couple of off-duty cops had pulled me off the bathroom floor, throwing water in my face, and dumped me on the sidewalk. I emerged from my blacked out with my friend Kitty shouting my name. "What?" I said, opening my eyes and drunkenly looking around. "I thought you were dying, you fuckhead," she yelled at me. I considered this. "I want a drink," I told her. "You can't go back in. The cops will beat the shit out of you." "But I love cops. Can we go to Portchester and drink?" Portchester was in New York, and the bars there stayed open until 4 a.m. We got in Kitty's car and drove to Portchester, where they served me more liquor. Then I threw up again and blacked out. When I woke up at dawn, I was dropped in the lounge chair by Kitty's parents in a pool in New Canaan. 16, hungover, and proud. Like, actually sounds like my group of friends at 16. Next chapter. Paragraph, not chapter. We're still on the same chapter. Heading west out of Stratford on my moped, I entered one of the wealthiest towns in the United States, Greenwich, Connecticut. The check cashing stores and housing projects in Stamford turned into leafy garden supply centers and mansions hiding behind giant prune hedges. I arrived at the house where we were having Bible study and packed my moped. Moped? Is it moped or mopped? M-O-P-E-D.
Moped?
Oh, it's a moped. Sorry, my French. Also, if you're new here, English is my second language. I am French, so I just read the words. So, moped. I am so fucking sorry.
What else do you think he was getting around?
I thought it was slang for something. I don't know. I was just going with it. Okay. That was awkward. Let's keep going. Moped, not mopped or moped. Moped. A 12-year-old green Peugeot between a Porsche Carrera and a Mercedes station wagon. After I took off my helmet, I rubbed my head to get the dried foam rubber out of my hair. I had bought the helmet at the Darien Salvation Army. It had been new in 1975. It didn't fit, and every time I wore it, I ended up with foam rubber dandruff. We were having Bible study at Catherine's house. Catherine was a sweet, shy junior at Greenwich High School who rode horses and listened to the Cure. Her family had moved to the States from Belgium a few years earlier. Her father's fiancé company had rented them an 8-bedroom mansion with a swimming pool, a tennis court, and a horse paddock with 6 acres in backcountry Greenwich. Today, I was going to be teaching Bible study in the basement. For Bible study, I wanted to talk about the Sermon on the Plain and in Luke. It was almost like Jesus' greatest hits, love your enemies, judge not lest you be judged, but also, woe to you who are rich, and woe to you who are well-fed now. See, I was Christian, but I was also a dick. I was poor, I lived in an abandoned factory, I spent $10 a week on food, so when I read, bless you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Bless you who are hunger now, for you will be satisfied. I felt smug and justified and favored in the eyes of God. Normally, I felt like a super Christian, and I worked under assumption that God was perpetually disappointed in me. I didn't do enough ministering to the homeless. I still wanted a career as a musician. I still had lustful thoughts, but when it came to poverty, I felt like I nailed it. I never met anyone as poor as I was now. Even the poor people I'd grown up around had indoor plumbing and walls made of stronger materials than salvaged plywood. So I was smugly going into million houses in Greenwich to judge the children of the rich and make them feel bad about being born into wealth. I wasn't concerned for their spiritual health. I didn't want to lovingly guide them into seeing the error of their ways. I just wanted to make them feel bad for having money. I also wanted them to applaud the legitimacy of my teachings. Since I had spent hours in my tiny room at the abandoned factory memorizing Bible passages and figuring out new and interesting ways to use Christianity to make people feel bad about themselves. I was also an expert at using Christianity to beat the shit out of my self. 3 weeks ago, I decided that my Christianity was inadequate. I felt like a fraud. For I was a Christian, but I had a home. Admittedly, my home was a tiny space in an abandoned factory, but it was still a home. I had read the teachings of Christ and understood from them that I was supposed to be homeless. I feel like people read different versions of the Bible. I guess you read what you see, you know? Christ wanted me to get rid of my possessions and go out and wander the earth, ministering to people. I felt called. One day I decided to take my faith out in the realm of the cloistered and academic and walk into the world with nothing except the clothes on my back and my Bible. I picked up my Bible, left the room, and closed the front door. I held the key up to the lock and then I stared at the key. I thought, if I put the key in the lock and turn, I leave and I don't come back. I commit to a life of wandering and doing my best to help people, anyone who needs it. The poor, the hungry. I leave and I turn my back on home, career, ambition, everything. The key hovered an inch from my lock. In my mind, I could hear the key sliding into the lock and turning. I imagined walking down the hallway, leaving the factory by the back door, going to pay my phone on the corner and calling my mom. I'd say, Mom, I need a favor. I'm leaving to wander and minister. Will you sell my stuff and give whatever money you make to the poor? But I couldn't do it. I stood at the door, key still outside the lock, and I prayed. God, if this is your will, then please give me the strength to do it. I felt like such a clear calling, but minutes passed and I was still standing at the door. I couldn't give up the familiar, no matter how humble, for the unknown. I had no guidelines or personal precedent for becoming a mendicant. I put the key back in my pocket, walked back into my room, and sat in the fiberglass school chair that Paul and I had fished out of the dumpster. I prayed again. God, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I can't leave everything and minister. I'm sorry, God. I felt like a fraud. I knew my calling, to leave, to have no possessions, to minister, and I couldn't do it. But I still wanted to judge the rich and their soft children. What an asshole. He reminds me so much of this guy I went to high school with though right now. Like came from a super religious family and like he was involved too, but like did it in the most like narcissist way, just like kind of what he's doing. At least he's admitting it. Catherine's little sister let me in, and I walked down the stairs to the basement of the mansion. There was a red felt pool table at the bottom of the stairs, and some comfortable couches and chairs arranged in a circle. 7 of the 8 Bible study regulars were there, clean and smiling. They all lived with their parents, sleeping in the same quiet bedrooms they'd known since childhood. The boys wore button-down Brooks Brothers shirts. The girls wore Calvin Klein jeans and Fair Isle sweaters. We sat, and one of the girls prayed. Thank God for you bringing us here, and thank you for giving us this place to meet and study. Please guide Moby as he brings us to your teaching. Amen. Amen, we all echoed. Okay, let's open our Bible to Luke 6:12, I said. Tori, do you want to start reading? We went around the room, each of us reading a few lines, ending at Luke 7. And I was ready. I still had the smell of the factory and my unwashed clothes. There were specks of my foam rubber in my hair from my ancient moped helmet. I was ready to bring the righteous judgment of God down to these suburban Christians. I went to bed listening to gunshots. They, I imagine, went to bed to the sound of snoring golden retrievers. Haven't we just read, "Woe to who are rich"? I felt justified. Holy vengeance building up inside of me. Then I looked at a table where Catherine's mom had put out cookies and lemonade for us. Catherine saw my glance. "Oh, do you want a cookie?" she asked. "My mom went to the health food store and got vegan cookies for you." "Thanks," I said, and paused. The wind of judgment leaving my sails. Had I done anything selfless today? Had I gone out of my way to be kind to anyone today? Had I fed anyone today? No. Here I was, firebrand Christian, the self-styled voice of judgmental God, staring at my failings in the form of a plate of vegan cookies. Catherine's mom had gone to some strange health food store to get weird vegan cookies for a friend of her daughter whom she never even met. And I was the good Christian? The thought came to me from Hosea. Okay, what's Hosea? Hosea? Oh my god, I don't know. Oh my god, Hosea, okay? I don't know. The thought came to me from Hosea. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. So I put my anger aside, and instead of judging these kind Christians around me, I talked about my experience 3 weeks earlier. How I'd felt called to leave everything so I can minister to the poor, and how I felt that I had disappointed God and asked for forgiveness. Then I talked about how we couldn't find the divine in the big gestures, grand statements and renunciations, but there was a quiet divinity in small things, like buying weird vegan cookies for a stranger, or letting people into your house and serving them food. In that moment, those small gestures seemed more important to me and more divine. So, thank you all for being here with me. I finished. And Catherine, please, thank your mom for the vegan cookies. I left out the fact that the cookies were very dry and terrible. Good Christian. After Bible study, we all went to Greenwich Christ Church to help the Episcopal minister's son Chris, appropriate, shoot scenes for his student film. Chris attended NYU, where he claimed his advisor was Martin Scorsese. "Will Martin Scorsese be at the church?" I asked Chris. "Probably," Chris said, doing his Tom Sawyer best to get us all there to work for free. I pulled up to the Christ Church at dusk and parked my moped under a spreading elm, next to the 18th century cemetery. Chris was standing there with a cluster of actors next to the portico that covered the entrance of one of the old stone chapels, explaining to all the volunteers what we were doing. As a musician, I had been drafted to hold the microphone. "Who's that over there?" I asked, pointing at a long-haired guy walking in circles on a lush lawn and talking to himself. He was wearing a dark winter coat and gesturing with his hand, as if he were emphatically making a point to a ghost. "Oh, that's Viggo Mortensen. He goes to school with me, and he's the lead of the film," Chris told me. "Why is he walking in circles? Does he have mad cow disease?" "Ha, no. He's just intense," Chris said. "When he's getting ready to shoot, that's what he does." We went up to the ancient wooden stairs in the chapel and spent the next 5 hours filming Viggo on the roof. He and the lead actress keep going over the same scenes, with Chris pushing them to do minor variations of the lines. The night got later, the wind picked up, and it got cold. "I thought movies were supposed to be glamorous," one of the tired and shivering high school students on the roof said to me. I was holding the microphone on the long telescoping pole. One of Chris's film students' friends asked me, "Do you work full-time as a boom operator?" "What's a boom operator?" I replied. "Ha, guess not," he said and walked away. At 1 a.m., after we'd shot the same scene a few dozen times, Chris announced, "Okay, everyone, that's a wrap." We all applauded ourselves, something I had never done before. I walked over to Viggo, who hadn't spoken to anyone all night. "Good job, Viggo," I said, holding out my hand. He took my hand, looked intensely to my eyes, and asked, "Was it?" And that is the end of chapter 2. Ooh, I can't wait to see what happens next. So if you enjoyed this, please stick around in the next couple of days. We will be doing chapter 3, which is Night Moves, which I'm so excited. So I hope you have a good whatever you're having. And yeah, see you next time. Bye.
You guys are still here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and remember to like and subscribe.